Hi everyone, Mia Paulus here with the Simplicity in Business and Life podcast. Today we're going to talk about how to structure your to-do list with less overwhelm. So before you tune out and say, oh, it's just another time management podcast, I have probably some different opinions on it and have a lot of experience in a bad way with it that I think you can learn from. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started.
No, it doesn't have to be so hard. No, it doesn't have to be so hard. Business and life made simple.
All right. So on the last podcast, I talked about my opinions of minimalism and tying that back into simplicity. And I want to just kind of continue to expand on that a little more in this podcast and really talk about kind of the to-do lists that so often uh, rule our lives or take control of our lives. And in that last podcast, I talked about a story experience I had, and I want to, for those that are just listening to this podcast, I want to just briefly tell that story again to kind of set the stage for what got me so passionate about this topic. So when I was in just probably like 6, 7 years ago, like I've been a business owner. Oh, it'd probably been 10 years already, and I've did a lot of things wrong already by then, and but I was so determined just to get out of the weeds because I'm like, man, it's been 8, 9, 10 years, and I'm still in the weeds of my business, and I got to get out. I'm like, I'm in the business of helping other people get out of the business. I need to practice what I preach and get out of my business myself. And so I had this brilliant idea that I would just start to work really, really hard to get to the bottom of my to-do list. And once I was caught up, then I would have the time to spend on the things that gave me value, the things that my purpose was. And uh, and so did just that. Every time I got an email in that I needed to do, I added it to my to-do list. And I'm a kind of a Trello board junkie. And so I would like add it to my Trello board, and I would even get it to where things would automatically go from my email to my Trello board, and I could tag it, and I had my all my columns. So I had like my urgent column and my to-do column and my resources column and my wish list column, and just anytime I had an idea or a thought or something I wanted to do, whether it was something that was urgent or just a dream that I had, I put it on there. And I was like, I was so like proud of myself because I did this. And I would work like you don't even want to know. It was a lot of days for like 16-hour days thinking I could get to the bottom of the to do this. Oh, when I'm done with this, then I can have all this free time. And I kept doing that. I kept doing that. And before I know it, 2 years has gone by and I have still not gotten to the bottom of my to-do list. And you're like, you did 2 years of that? And you'd be surprised at how many of us still do that. Like we still think that the to-do list is the answer to um, to our life being in order. And while to-do lists are good, like I'm a list person. I love lists. So I'm not downplaying lists by any means, but I want us to think differently about that to-do list. And so if you think about if you're an entrepreneur and executive and you're watching this, like we really we want to have order, but we also, especially if we're the visionaries, like it's our job to stay have a very clear mind and to be able to know have a clear vision of our what pathway forward for the future. It's very important to be able to stay innovative and creative and in that zone. And when we're ruled by our to-do list, we're no longer able to be innovative and creative and agile, and we're now saying, okay, this is what I put on my to-do list for today, and this is what I need to get done. And so many entrepreneurs, we run our lives that way, and and so I just want to get us thinking about kind of a different way to really look at our to-do list. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today and really go just deep dive into that. As visionaries, again, the ability to be agile is so important and to stay innovative. And so in this podcast, like you don't have to do time management. I am against time management because it's not, we all have 24 hours in a day. Yes, we have to manage our tasks, but really if we start to manage our mind and our mindset more, that is when I think again the rest kind of starts to take care of itself. And I talked about this in the last podcast around simplicity. I think so often we focus on the tactical, here's what you need to do to structure and you get it done, and then we beat ourselves up when said the expert said to do this and it's not working for me. But if we don't have our mindset right first, none of that stuff matters. That stuff is going to be very difficult to achieve if we don't really have a clear mind first. Recently I just finished a book um, around having purposeful focus in your business. And I really talk about really building the foundational elements of your business. So your vision, your purpose, and your values, and really understanding what those are. Because when you know what those are, you can really springboard and get further faster in your business. And so I spent a lot of time researching around that. And for a long time, I've always talked about my whole purpose in life is to help inspire others to be true to their purpose and give them the tools to be able to have that freedom and ability to live true to their purpose. And so it's definitely an area that I'm very passionate about. And so I kind of took that same concept around our purpose and applied it to our to-do list. Like, are we attacking our to-do list from our standpoint of like where we should be spending our energy and where our purpose should be spent? Because we talk about being true to our purpose, but then is our to-do list match that? And so that's why I want to teach you to kind of how to structure your to-do list differently. And it's not probably what you're probably expecting. So the first thing I want to talk about is it is okay to have more on your today list than you can get done. And here's why I say that. You're like, nobody says to do that. They say only put on there what you know you can accomplish. But here's the thing. Even when I'm like, okay, I'm only going to put 3 things on that to-do list because then I know I can get it done. There's days when I couldn't even get those 3 things done because when you're an entrepreneur, things come up. And so you have to know and evaluate everything in your life. Is this thing more important than what I had on my to-do list? And that ability, again, to be agile and flexible is so critical. And I think we think we're a failure if we didn't complete everything on our to-do list or if we ended up switching gears. And actually, I think that is a sign of strength when you're willing to adapt and shift. And the ability, not only personally, but in business, to be willing to adapt and shift is really what is required anymore to be able to make it and keep that competitive edge and that advantage. So if you can first learn to be able to shift and adapt, to be okay with change personally, your business is going to be more willing to do that. And that is honestly a requirement to do business anymore, is the ability to innovate and shift and say, okay, this product isn't working. Maybe you have to change what you do to get your vision accomplished. And so on our to-do list, like I talk a lot about the 80-20 rule, that Pareto's principle. And in that, it talks about how if you focus on the really you get 80% of your results typically from just 20% of what you do. And I like to talk about it from a little different angle, where if you say, okay, here's all the things that I have, you take the 20% that is probably the things that align most with your purpose and getting you where you need to go. And if you put 80% of your effort into that 20%, there's something that's called the 64-4 rule. And what that means is you can literally get 64% of your results with just 4% effort. So think about, I always talk about like, what would it take to just work 5 hours a day? If when you talk about things in that light, it forces you to be a little more resourceful and innovative with how you spend your time. And so, okay, what would it take to work 5 hours a day? How could I get 64% of my results with just 4% effort? When you start thinking in that way, it shifts the dynamic of your to-do list, where now you're like, okay, I'm going to here's my most urgent, important things. I really need to get these done. And those, again, they could change based on other important, urgent things that come in during the day. So be willing to do that. But I think that's important. You don't want to, you want to be mindful of those things. And then on your today list, I think it's okay to have more on your to-do list. And here's why, of what you can do for your today list. And here's why. So there's kind of a saying that says, if you shoot for the moon, you'll land amongst the stars. And what that means is like, it's okay to dream big. It's okay to dream bigger. And I talk about that from a vision perspective. So the vision in your company. I think you can kind of take that from the standpoint of your to-do list a little bit too. You know, maybe you're going to have a really great day. And if there's a little bit more on your to-do list, you might get more done than if you only had 3 things on. Because you're like, oh, I only have 3 things on, so I don't have to work as hard. So if you have more on and you come at it from the mindset that you're not going to accomplish everything on it, it does a couple things. One, you might work a little harder and get a few more of those things done, which is okay. You might be forced to realize that perfection isn't accomplishing everything on your to-do list. Obviously, perfection is unachievable and it's relative, but I think so many of us have that perfectionist mindset. So we think, oh, I got to get everything done on my to-do list. So it kind of forces you to be okay with the fact that you didn't get everything done on your to-do list when you know you put more on it than you could achieve. So again, I'm just trying to find little things to help us get out of that crazy zone in entrepreneurship that we get into, where we get stuck in the whirlwind. We don't want to let go. And so this just forces us to be a little more agile. And then the other thing is when there's more on your to-do list than you can accomplish, I always think about this. Like sometimes you read these articles where so many people were like somebody was stuck on the side of the road and nobody stopped to help them because everybody was just so focused on what they needed to do in their life and they weren't willing to be able to look up and out and look around and say, hey, this person needs my help today, but and you know what? I can move these things off my list. These aren't important. This is more important to me to help this person. And my husband's actually the perfect example of this because he's very service minded. So he always would find people on the side of the road and jump out and help them. And it's just kind of natural for him. For me, I have to actually make a conscious decision to remind myself to look around and realize that, not lose sight of humanity and helping people. And if we get too rigid, we lose sight of that. And I always think like I've tried to be good. I mean, I'm a Christian person, so I always think, okay, what does God want me to do today? And it forces me to think outside of myself and a little more on being a little more humble on me and open to what my day should be like, and realizing that I shouldn't be in. If I try to control everything, that's the exact way to feel out of control. Um, so that's why I'm like, throw out the time management. Yes, we have to manage our tasks, but you can't. We all have 24 hours in the day. We can't manage our time in that regards. So many of us with our to-do list, we think like, oh, if I wake up an hour earlier, or if I delegate more work, if I track all my time, which I don't think that's bad to do for like a week to know what you're spending your time on. But if you like literally get to where you're micromanage every single day and time, I've been this way, and I got to where I drove myself crazy, and so I had to learn to again go back to moderation. It seems like every episode I keep bringing it back to moderation, um, and realizing that the more that we can trust ourselves and be willing to listen to ourselves, and that's when magic happens in our lives, and that means we're more. I talked about this in the last podcast too about being having that time to have silence and be able to listen and ponder and be able to know like what is it that I need to be spending my time on and who am I supposed to be in this life. And so if we just try to pack more in, we're just going to get busier and busier. And then we just like, okay, I delegated this thing, but what do? We end up filling that hole with something else. And about, man, it was probably like 6 to 12 months ago. My team has just gotten so much. It's just amazing where they were literally taking everything that I had to do off my plate pretty much, where I was literally a true visionary, focused on these lives. I focused on writing, just being, just building content and getting out there into the world. And it was amazing because my team just took that, all the day to day off of me. And it was almost, I felt a little bit like a drug addict coming off a drug because I was so used to the high of just the crazy and the busy of entrepreneurship. And it took me, I will say, probably about 3 to 4 months to like get back in a new groove because I was like, oh, like what do I do with myself now that I'm not stuck behind this stuff. And so think about that. If all of the stuff was removed from your life, if all of the crazy, all the things weighing you down, all the things you haven't gotten to yet, just remove all those and look at yourself and who you are. Are you okay with that person? And my husband actually just I kind of took that from somebody else that he had heard that from, and I think that was so cool. It's like if you remove all of that, what's left? Are you okay with who you are? Do you like who you are? And I think that is very important to think about and um, to ponder. And if there's things that you're not okay with, what does it take to change those and to um, improve upon those things that you're not okay with that maybe you're hiding behind the stuff of. So I think those are all just important things to think about in regards to what you're doing. And for me, like I have a team sourcing, outsourcing type company where I'm all about delegation and eliminating and automating things. Like that's what I preach all the time and what I do. But if our mindsets aren't right, none of that stuff matters. Because again, you'll delegate that and another one comes on. It's kind of like hoarders. Like if they don't change their mindset on stuff. If let's say a company comes in on those shows, those hoarding shows, where it's like they come and they help them get rid of all the stuff, but they haven't healed themselves inside, they're just going to start filling their house with more stuff again. And I think the same thing applies to our mind. Um, so the second thing I want to talk about is like time scarcity mindset is dangerous. Like a lot of times we'll say, man, I wish I had more hours in the day. I wish that I had time to do this or I could do this. And you start, it's kind of like when you look at yourself in the mirror and you start beating yourself up about all the things that you think are wrong with you. It's kind of the same thing if you do the same thing with time management, like with time scarcity. It's like, I can't do all this. You end up not doing as much. You end up debilitating yourself when you speak that way instead of speaking from the positive, like, what can I do? What can I accomplish? What is my purpose? Where should my energy be spent today? And being fluid and flexible with that. And then you'll find your perfectionist meter drops a little bit. And it isn't that I think your excellence meter increases and your perfectionist meter decreases, meaning like by realizing we're not perfect, by realizing we're all human and fallible, and sometimes we're going to drop the ball, and that's okay. Sometimes we're going to be like, oh, I didn't get anything on my to-do list, but I spent more time with my kids because they wanted me to play with play a game with them. And I'm guilty of this too. Like, I'm not preaching as if I'm perfect with all this. It's never a perfect balance. Which leads me to my next thing. Life isn't always about balance. Sometimes you need to be heads down. Like when I was launching my book, it was heads down getting that done. Right now, we're in crazy growth mode in our company, and I had to kind of come back into the company for a minute and really help with some things till we get enough people hired again to kind of fill the void. And it's okay. Like I know that's not long term. I have a great leadership team that will take that away from me again. Like that's not a fear of mine because I experienced what it's like to not be in that. And so it's okay to have seasons, and I'm not here to profess that I have it all together and everything's perfect in my life and I get everything done in balance every day. Like that's just not the way life is. And I think when we realize that there's seasons to life and that, yeah, again, back to the 80-20 percentage, maybe 80% of our life is all of that in balance. But if we're willing to realize that maybe 20% of it is, okay, that didn't go as I had planned. And sometimes that's fun. Like to me, I actually enjoy the change and the hiccups that happen in life. I think that's how we learn and grow. And again, if we try to control, we're going to feel out of control. Um, and I think we can kind of think of our time like as a pizza. If you say, okay, I spend this portion of my time focusing on this thing and this person focusing on this every day. And so if the more slices you put through that pizza, the more divided your time is and focus. And so if we can group the things that we do together that kind of work together, like for me, I do a lot of videos and copy and content writing and all that kind of works together. And it's really cool when I'm able to just kind of stay in that groove as much as possible. And my team handles a lot of the other things. I find that really helps for me to stay as a visionary and an entrepreneur in that zone that we all need to be in, that so many entrepreneurs aren't. Like we again, you guys have all heard it. We need to work on our business, on in it, but it takes a team and approaching our to-do list the right way. Um, there's a of teen sorry, can't say it. Dean Graziosi a while back had come up with the not to do list. He had I love that term and that concept because I think it's the opposite, right, of the to do list where it's like, okay, what things can I take off my list that are not even important? And I think if I had done that for those 2 years that I was trying to get to the bottom, like I'm not sure I ever once approached it from that perspective. Like, do I really need to be doing these things? And and eliminate them, and then again, then fill it with things that go towards your purpose in life, the things that give you value. Don't fill it with just more stuff. I think that's really important to be able to do. And so I always talk about like this think differently, work differently, and live differently concept. You know, if you think differently of like, what would it take to work 5 hours a day? What would it take to live true to my purpose? You know, start again, these podcasts, I'm just trying to get you to think differently than maybe you've thought about before. And hopefully you can pull just even one thing to really help you in your life and in your business. And then work differently. Again, focus. What would it take to be able to spend that time on the things that are that going to move the needle the most in your business, and then live differently. Like if somebody's stuck on the side of the road or a neighbor needs you or you got an impression that you should go knock on somebody's door, follow that. Don't downplay those impressions that we get and be willing to listen to them. We're so busy that we don't slow down enough to listen to that. And that's when just magical things happen and miracles happen in life, is when we're willing to listen. And if we all did that more, just think about how many miracles would happen in life. Because I think they're there. They're not loud impressions. So we have to be willing to hear those. So I've talked about this. I'm just going to close with about like innovation in business and kind of wrapping it back around to business. Business, if the life is complicated, business is more complicated. The tools we could use are there's more options, uh, and we have more tools to make us productive. Yet we're still busier than we've ever been, and so I'm just trying to get us to think about, how do we change that? How do we change business to where we're not so stuck in all of the day to day of it? And if we as visionaries can get out of the muck, get out of it, and focus to be true visionaries, how much more innovative would your business be? Much further faster could you get towards the vision of your company and where you want to go? Um, I think if you're at the top of your company, and you're not doing that for your company, and staying visionary and having those quiet moments to ponder, I believe you're doing your team a disservice. You might think that you're failing your team because you're not in the weeds with them. And I know that a lot of business owners feel guilty when they have their employees do stuff for them. But if you just communicate with them why your role is important and to be in that space and what that does, um, they can start to understand it. And a lot of employees just come in out of the gate understanding it. I know a lot of mine do, but I know sometimes in construction and different places, maybe it's hard to, the employees aren't coming in know they think their boss isn't working if they're not on the job site with them and doing stuff. And so if we can just have that open dialogue and communication with our employees of what your role is and why it's important, and what their role is and why it's important, and together we can go further faster together. Like that is where the magic happens, and where business is simplified, life is simplified, everybody has more time to spend with their family. So that's hopefully this is helpful. It's different than a typical time management episode, I'm sure. But I hope to always challenge that. I always want to challenge us to think a little bit differently and realize that we got a lot inside of us that we can learn in ourselves. We don't always, everything isn't learned just from reading and experts and all of that. I always want us to take all of that, but then process it inside and make sure that we're not hiding behind things that maybe need to be healed and work through. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, you can go to my website, miapaulus.com. We got that live a couple weeks ago. I'm really excited about it. We're going to continue to add to it and build on it. So check me out there, and follow, like my podcast. I want to get just started it. So I want to get some reviews and some likes on there. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. And I will see you on Thursday.
No, it doesn't have to be so hard. No, it doesn't have to be so hard. Business and life made simple.